A thick fog lingered over the cliffs of Big Sur, wrapping everything in a heavy, quiet haze. On that chilly morning in March, Tom's old radio crackled suddenly, cutting through the usual sounds he relied on every day. The voice on the other end was strained, almost shaky, as it read out an urgent message. An old police cruiser had been spotted at the base of the notorious Devil's Slide, a place known for sharp drops and shattered wrecks. Tom felt his heart pound hard in his chest as he heard the location. He stayed frozen for a second, keys in one hand and coffee mug in the other, letting the words settle in. For 13 long years, the memory of his wife, Diane, never left him. Not during quiet moments at night, not during long hikes along the misty cliffs. She had vanished during a night shift in 1977. No one found a clue, not even a shoe or badge, and every search ended in frustration. Now, as he let the mug clatter onto the counter and fumbled for his jacket, a mixture of fragile hope and deep fear pushed him to the door. He started the truck, the engine coughing awake, and pulled onto the damp, winding road, heading straight toward a past he had tried but never managed to leave behind. When Tom finally reached the overlook, the whole area was buzzing with activity. There were several police cruisers parked in a crooked line along the edge of the turnout, their lights flashing red and blue against the thick morning fog. Yellow tape stretched between road signs and a few broken bushes, keeping back a small knot of onlookers who had gathered despite the early hour. The air brimmed with low voices and the shuffling of feet on wet ground, everyone careful not to get in the way. Detective Lisa Carter was waiting by the barrier, her face set and serious. She gave Tom a nod and said his name, then walked with him toward the scene, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "It's rough down there, Tom. I want you to be ready." The words settled heavy in the space between them. Tom nodded back, not trusting his voice just then. Above them, the steady drone of a rescue helicopter added to the tension. Its blades cut through the fog as a pair of crew members maneuvered thick ropes down the side of the cliff. Far below, a rusty old car was wedged against rock and tangled in seagrass, barely visible except when a stray beam of light caught the chrome. With every movement, every snap of a cable, the crowd fell quiet, as though everyone sensed that something huge and maybe terrible was about to be uncovered. Something the ocean had kept hidden for more than 13 years. As the crew finally hoisted the battered car up from the rocks, everyone on the cliff edge went still. Years of salt, sun, and ocean waves had done their work, leaving the old cruiser stained orange with rust, covered with bits of shell and strands of dried seaweed. It took a while for the forensics team to make their way to it, each one moving carefully as they snapped photos and took notes, marking every dent, every trace of what the car had been through. They circled the vehicle, speaking softly into their tape recorders, treating the whole process with a kind of quiet respect. Tom found his hands shaking, shoving them deep into his jacket pockets to keep control. Every instinct screamed at him to get closer, to see for himself, but Lisa gently kept him behind the line. The minutes crawled by. At last, one of the detectives stepped away from the group and called out an update. The serial number they pulled from the frame matched the one on Diane's squad car, the same number Tom had memorized all those years ago. Even though he thought he was ready to hear it, the confirmation hit him hard. A wave of pain mixed with a strange, numb relief. Now, there could be no more wondering, no more what-ifs. Inside the car, things got even stranger. There were no remains, only a few dried stains and a battered .40 caliber ammo case, just like the ones used by the department back in the day. The forensic team moved in slow motion, laying each item in evidence bags. Every eye was on them. But no one spoke above a whisper. It felt as if any loud sound might disturb the quiet questions hanging in the air. Each piece, fragments of glass, a faded parking ticket, an old metal flashlight, seemed to hint at what had really happened during those lost hours. The blood they found was especially troubling. There were dark patches in the trunk and traces, smudged under the back seat, enough to make it clear that something violent had happened. Nobody said it out loud at first, but Tom watched Lisa's face as she shared the news with a few other officers, and he saw the old rumors start to crumble. People had whispered for years that maybe Diane had just left, that maybe she gave up and started a new life somewhere else. But now, looking at those stains and imagining what Diane must have gone through, Tom felt his sadness and anger mixed together. The idea of her running away didn't fit anymore, and the reality they were left with felt colder than the sea air. Not long after, the department supervisor, Bill Harrison, showed up. He had been Diane's boss. All those years ago, Bill carried himself with the air of someone who had seen it all, and he tried to bring some order to the messy scene. His tone was steady, but there was a caution in his eyes as he pulled Tom and Lisa aside to talk it through. Bill started throwing out alternative explanations, most of which seemed more like grasping at straws than real theories. He wondered aloud if Diane might have gotten mixed up in something off the books, or if she'd panicked and run after making some mistake. Bill's words sounded almost rehearsed, like he had practiced them for years in case this day ever came. Tom listened, but he could feel his anger building with every suggestion. He shook his head and stared straight at Bill. "No," he said, voice low and certain. "Diane wouldn't just walk away from her life, and she wouldn't get involved in anything dirty." The blood in the car, the found ammo, these things shouted to Tom that something terrible had happened to her. Every memory of Diane echoed her integrity. Tom stood there, shoulders stiff, unwilling to let anyone tarnish the truth about the woman he still loved. By the time the sun climbed higher and burned off some of the fog, reporters had already started to gather around the scene. It did not take long before a wall of cameras and microphones popped up along the roadside. Tom found himself surrounded by lights and questions that came one after another, some blunt, some just for the sake of drama. Microphones were shoved. Toward his face, flashes went off, and someone called out Diane's name in hopes of drawing out a soundbite. Tom took a shaky breath, steadying himself. In a voice that shook with emotion but never wavered in purpose, he promised everyone listening that there would be a thorough and honest investigation, and he made it clear he would not let anyone smear Diane's good name. Even as the noise from the press grew, Tom spoke about Diane's dedication, saying again and again she was not someone who would just disappear. Detective Lisa Carter saw the toll it was taking and gently pulled Tom away, guiding him out of the reporter's reach. She said he should step back from the official case. Being this close would only make things harder. Still, Tom felt a pull in two directions. He knew what he was supposed to do, but the pain of not knowing all these years just would not let him go. He could not stop, not now. Back at home, Tom could not shake the case from his mind. As soon as he stepped through the door, he went straight to his little office and pulled the old cardboard boxes from the closet. The same boxes he had saved for years, even when others told him to let it go. He laid out stacks of reports, faded, photographs and long-winded witness statements across the floor, filling every inch of the rug. The room looked like the inside of his head, messy, scattered, but desperate for meaning. Every scrap seemed sharper now, each bit of evidence holding more weight than it had before. Tom stared at crime scene photos, scribbled timelines and copies of Diane's notes. One thing kept jumping out at him: the last line scribbled in Diane's patrol log. It was so ordinary, a routine traffic stop on Fremont Avenue. Nothing unusual, just a couple lines and then nothing else. After that, there was only silence, no call for backup, no record of a struggle or odd behavior. The radio logs were empty. The dispatchers had not heard from her again. This gap, the sudden break in Diane's usually steady routine, bothered Tom more than anything. He felt sure he was missing something right in front of him. As Tom sifted Through Diane's notes and the old reports, a certain name started popping up more than he remembered. Ken Miller, the shift supervisor that evening. Ken's signature was right there, next to Diane's, in the time logs. The more Tom thought about it, the more he felt there was something odd about how the records just ended, as if the regular flow of the shift had been interrupted and no one had wanted to talk much about it. Needing real answers, Tom figured the best move would be to go straight to Ken, someone who had been there, someone who might still know more than he went on record with back then. Late one afternoon, Tom found Ken driving his patrol car, cruising down the same stretch of Fremont Avenue where Diane had last been seen. Tom flagged him down, managing to keep his nerves under control. Ken's posture changed when he recognized Tom. He seemed uneasy, looking anywhere but at Tom's face. Tom suggested they grab a coffee to talk, trying to keep things casual, but Ken hesitated. He mumbled something about being busy and promised they could meet up later, the promise landing flat and hollow. To Tom, it sounded like Ken was trying to buy time or dodge the conversation altogether, and that made Tom even more sure there was something here worth digging into. Driving back toward the station, Tom's mind spun with new questions. He thought back to how things were in the department back in 1977. It was a rougher crowd then, mostly men who guarded their territory and positions with a stubbornness that bordered on mean. Diane was one of the first women in the squad, and Tom remembered how she had to work twice as hard to prove herself. She did everything by the book, but he had seen the way some of the older guys looked at her, the way quiet conversations stopped when she walked into the room. Tom could not shake the feeling that there might have been more brewing beneath the surface than anyone had admitted. Why had Diane been out there alone that night anyway? It was standard for patrols to travel in pairs, especially for someone still new to the street. Was it a mix-up? Or did somebody make that decision on purpose? And if so, what was the real reason? Tom's gut told him that the answer to what happened was hidden somewhere inside the department's four walls, among people who might have resented Diane for trying to outwork and outshine them. The uncomfortable truth was starting to take shape, and Tom knew he could not let it go. Back at the station, Tom stepped in just as Bill Harrison was on the phone, speaking in a rushed whisper. Bill's face was tight with stress, and Tom caught him mentioning how the recovered patrol car needed to be moved as soon as possible. Bill rattled off some reason about environmental safety and department procedures, but his voice quivered, and it sounded more like excuse than explanation. The way he clutched the receiver and darted his eyes around the room told Tom there was more to it. Tom stood quietly in the hallway, watching Bill for a moment before slipping away. He could not shake the feeling that Bill was not just stressed about the normal pressures of the investigation. There was something personal in his anxiety, a flicker of fear that some buried secret would be uncovered if the car stuck around too long. Maybe evidence left years ago still lingered in the creases of that old cruiser, something Bill wanted gone before anyone else had the chance to notice. More than ever, Tom felt a weight building in his chest. Each small act of nervousness, each attempt by the higher-ups to shuffle things around, seemed designed to keep the full story out of reach. It felt less like a routine investigation and more like a struggle for the truth itself. A day later, Tom was catching his breath in the break room when Detective Lisa Carter stepped in, holding a brown file folder. She slid it across the table, to him, almost like she was handling something hot. Inside was a statement from a witness named Sandra Evans, someone Tom vaguely remembered from the original case. What caught his eye was that Sandra's report talked about seeing a patrol car and a white van parked along Jefferson Boulevard on the same night Diane vanished. Strangely, the statement had been filed away under an unrelated case, tucked into a folder about a burglary that happened months later. It was almost as if someone wanted the statement hidden, but could not bring themselves to destroy it. Tom's curiosity turned into concern as he dug out Sandra's official testimony from Diane's file. When he put the two side by side, the differences were huge. In the official report, Sandra only mentioned hearing a car door and some muffled voices, not a word about a van, and certainly not about another vehicle. Tom felt his heart pick up pace. There was no way two stories this different could be chalked up to forgetfulness. If Sandra's first version was true, it could break the whole case open and expose what really happened that night. He knew he had to track her down right away. Lisa agreed to join Tom, and together they drove out to Sandra Evans' modest home on the edge of Los Angeles. Tom parked a block away, mostly from habit, and the two of them approached quietly. As they turned up the walkway, they saw Bill Harrison standing on the porch, envelope in hand, speaking to Sandra in low, urgent tones. The tension in the air was thick. Sandra's hands shook as she clutched her robe, and her eyes darted nervously between Bill and the open door. Tom and Lisa exchanged looks, keeping out of sight until Bill hurried past them, barely glancing up as he left the driveway. He looked pale and rattled. Once he was gone, Sandra hesitated, then waved Tom and Lisa inside with a silent nod. Sitting at her small kitchen table, Sandra finally let out a long, shaky breath. Her fear was written all over her face. She admitted she had seen Diane that night, pulling over a white van at the edge of Jefferson Boulevard. Afterward, people from the department, Bill included, had pressured her to change her story. Money was left in her mailbox, and the quiet message was clear: keep silent, and everything would go away. After so many years, the truth came pouring out, and Tom knew they were finally closing in on what really happened that night. Hearing Sandra's story laid everything out in a way that felt heavier than Tom expected. It was not just the night of Diane's disappearance that was twisted. It was what came after. Sandra explained in a tired voice how, after refusing to stay quiet at first, she had been fired from her job at the old diner. Tips dried up, and people she had known for years suddenly avoided her. Every few months, Bill Harrison would appear or send someone else, always with a bit of cash in an envelope and a reminder to stay quiet. He made it clear that if she caused trouble, things could get worse. The fear stuck with her, shaping every part of her life even as the years rolled by. Despite all that, Sandra said she was willing to tell her story now. But she had been burned before and wanted to be sure that this time it would actually make a difference. She looked Tom straight in the eye and explained that she would testify, but only if there was hard proof connecting Bill and whoever else might have been involved to not only the crime, but also the cover-up. For Tom and Lisa, finding that proof was the next big step. They both knew that without it, everything could fall apart again. Tom thought back to something Sandra had mentioned in passing. She remembered Frank Lopez, Diane's old supervisor, doing a patrol around the park where she had worked. That small detail gnawed at Tom, especially knowing how close Frank and Bill used to be. He shared his suspicion with Lisa, and right away they agreed it was worth digging deeper. With the plan forming, they drove out to Mariposa Park early that evening, careful not to draw attention as they circled the lot. Right away, Tom spotted both Bill's and Frank's cars parked near the edge, away from the playground and the main flow of the public. He and Lisa moved quietly, weaving through the trees just off the main path. Voices carried farther than the men probably realized, and Tom caught the sound of Bill and Frank talking fast, arguing about time running out and the new officers asking too many questions. Both men were lifting something heavy, a beat-up cardboard box taped up tight and a big black garbage bag that sagged with whatever weighed it down. From behind a low bush, Tom watched as the pair struggled to lug their load toward the thickest patch of trees. The urgency in their voices and the care they took to stay out of sight made it clear they were desperate to hide something, and they did not want anyone to know it was there. Tom and Lisa exchanged a look, realizing this might be the break they needed. Crouched low behind a tangled pile of branches, Tom and Lisa listened as Bill and Frank's muffled voices drifted through the trees. What they heard made Tom's stomach twist. Frank muttered something about the box being the last tie to her, and that if the police ever got their hands on it, the DNA would sink all of us. Bill snapped back, reminding him they did not have much time, and that the risk of someone stumbling across the remains was getting bigger with all the renewed interest in the case. Fear seemed to cling to every word they said, and it was obvious both men felt trapped. Tom and Lisa stayed back, hidden in the shadows as Frank knelt down in a small clearing. With Bill standing guard, Frank used a shovel to quickly dig a shallow pit under a thick old sycamore. He grunted as he heaved the box and that heavy black bag into the hole, then pulled dirt and dried leaves back over the spot. They took a minute to pat everything smooth before leaving, glancing around nervously the whole time. Watching it all from a distance, Tom felt a mix of anger and resolve rising inside him. There was no way he was letting them get away with what they had done to Diane. It was time to bring the truth to light. After Frank and Bill hurried away from the clearing, Tom and Lisa stayed out of sight, waiting until the coast was clear. Then, careful not to leave any tracks, they made their way back to the car. Before they could catch their breath, they saw Frank's sedan pull out of the lot and head toward a cluster of old warehouses just a few blocks from the park. Feeling the urgency, Tom and Lisa followed at a safe distance. Through a gap in a fence, they watched Frank meet up with a couple of rough-looking guys near one of the loading docks. There was a short exchange, and Frank picked up a tightly wrapped package before heading back to his patrol car. The next moment, two young women, looking scared and unsure, were hustled from the warehouse and led by Frank toward his car. The way he ushered them inside made it pretty clear they were not free to go wherever they wanted. Lisa did not hesitate. She called for backup right away, rattling off their location to the dispatcher in a steady voice. Tom felt his gut twist again as he realized this was bigger than anything he had imagined before. It was not just one bad apple or a single dirty cop. This was a mess of corruption, drugs and trafficking, all tangled up and shielded by people who should have been stopping it. Within minutes, sirens echoed through the empty streets as squad cars and black vans screeched into the lot near the warehouses. Officers in tactical gear spread out, clearing corners and storming through steel doors, while Tom and Lisa watched from behind a crate, hearts racing. The whole scene turned into controlled chaos. Suspects dragged out in handcuffs, shouting and arguing with the officers. Some tried to run but were caught in the lot or tackled at the fence. Meanwhile, a couple more frightened young women were found huddled in a back room, and officers guided them safely outside. When the team searched the far end of the building, they forced open a hidden door in the floor. What they found underneath was shocking. A cramped drug lab with fumes still lingering in the air and tables full of equipment. Stacks of cash, bags of powder and weapons lay scattered everywhere. It became impossible to ignore the fact that police uniforms were mixed in with the criminals, hanging on hooks or in lockers. This was not just a street gang operating unchecked. Some of the officers themselves were part of it. As Frank tried to convince the detectives of his innocence, it was clear his story no longer stood up. Everything was finally unraveling, and Tom felt real hope that justice for Diane and all the victims was finally within reach. As dawn painted the city in a quiet orange glow, officers worked carefully near the sycamore tree where Tom and Lisa had watched Bill and Frank the night before. After hours of digging, they recovered what they had hoped and feared would be there, remains wrapped in what was left of that old black bag. Sifting through the dirt, a detective found a tarnished silver locket tucked alongside the bones. Opening the little heart-shaped pendant, Tom recognized the initials engraved inside, Diane's initials, leaving no doubt about her fate. There was relief that her story was finally told, but sorrow weighed heavy on Tom's shoulders. That necklace said everything about someone who had once meant the world to him. Before noon, Sandra went to the precinct and formally gave her statement. This time, everything was written down, signed, and recorded. She spoke clearly about what Bill had done, what she had seen, and how fear and bribery kept her quiet for so long. Each detail she added fit perfectly with the physical evidence, making the case against those involved much stronger. Slowly, Tom felt the walls of silence and fear start to crack. It was clear that, with the truth coming out, justice could finally begin to work, not just for Diane, but for all the others tangled in the mess these men had left behind. Inside the precinct, Bill was brought into one of the small, windowless interview rooms, with Lisa and Tom sitting across the table from him. He looked different now, shoulders slumped, a tired look in his eyes, like he had finally run out of excuses. The folder of evidence on the table was thick, and Tom made sure Bill could see every photo, every signed statement, and every tiny detail they had uncovered over the last few days. With nowhere left to hide, and knowing his partners were already talking, Bill finally cracked. His words were shaky at first, but soon the whole ugly picture spilled out. He talked about how Frank had helped with what happened to Diane, who had been trying to stand up to them, and how the others were pulled in, each helping somehow with the cover-up. Then he talked about the money, the drugs moving through the department, and which officers had been part of the ring for years. Tom listened in disbelief. Some names Bill mentioned had been his friends or mentors since his rookie days. The realization that so much of the trust he had placed in his co-workers was broken hit hard, mixing anger with regret. Even as justice started to come together, Tom realized that the cost of truth could be heavy, maybe heavier than he ever expected. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Tom found himself drawn to the evidence room one last time. He checked in with the officer on duty and quietly asked to see Diane's locket. Holding the cool, silver heart in his palm, he closed his eyes for a moment, letting memories rush in. The way Diane used to laugh when he tried to cook, the stubborn tilt of her chin, and her steady belief that things could always get better. The tears slipped out, silent but steady, and he did not bother to wipe them away. They were not just for Diane, but for all the trust that had been shattered, and all the people who had been let down by those meant to protect them. Still, there was comfort in knowing Diane had not run away or abandoned anyone. She had fought against a system that chose to silence her. A few minutes later, Lisa joined Tom in the quiet hallway. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they made a promise to each other and to every survivor they had helped through those long days. Together, they would work to rebuild the department, cleaning out the rot and honoring Diane's memory in the only way that made sense. The weight of justice no longer felt so crushing, and as they stepped outside into the cool night air, Tom felt the first hint of hope warming his chest since everything began.